Welcome back. You're now watching the lifestyle segment on the Weekend Show brought to you by Holocrunch. Now, today's episode is a continuation of the series Empower Her Game, which is brought to you by Worthy. Now, yesterday, the 26th of July 2024, the Olympics kicked off in Paris and France, and people from all over the world tuned in to watch their teams and their country in the march past, in the parade and the opening ceremony. But the most important part is to watch people win trophies, medals, and also create and make history. However, for the first time in Olympic history, we now have gender parity, which will be achieved as an equal number of events and medals up for grabs for both men and women. Incidentally, Nigeria too has achieved parity at this year's game, with over 60% of the 87-person delegation being female. Now, at Worthy, the sponsors of this series, this is seen as a cultural moment for us in Nigeria and Africa globally, and also for women as we look to have conversations around improving policy and call policymakers to increase investment in women economic empowerment, and also a focus on women's health, spotlighting on Nigeria's female athletes who are participating at this high-level event. But generally, how can we work together to ensure that there's better investment in women economic empowerment and women's health? And I do have some really interesting guests with me today. In the studio over here, I have Joy Una, who is the Special Initiatives Lead at Gatefield Impact. Good morning and welcome to the Weekend Show.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you. We also have joining us Inidima Okoje, who is an actress and a women's health advocate. Good morning, Inidima.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Also, we have Jimmy Akinsola, a broadcaster, sports presenter, actor, and host. Good morning, Jimmy.
A very good morning to everyone watching at this moment. The Olympics are here and the excitement is in the air.
It's a pleasure, and I can't wait for us to start this conversation. And I'll come to you very soon because I have some conversations to have with you, which I can't wait to have. But let's start with Joy. What's women economic empowerment about, and why is this conversation important at this point in time?
All right, yeah, thank you. So the first thing that I would say in responding to that question is that Nigerian women represent 70% of the country's poorest people. And this is not because they do not have the ability to do something about the economic situation, but it is because of years of long ingrained cultural and gender norms that have relegated women to domestic functions and unpaid labor. So essentially, women's economic empowerment is creating the right conditions for women to succeed. It is giving them access, it is giving them opportunities, but most importantly, giving them the agency to do what they want with the opportunities that have been afforded to them. And specifically to nation building, when you empower a woman, it has multiplier effects across different indices, from public health to poverty reduction and even the economy. Interestingly, analysts have shown that if Nigerian women are able to contribute to the workforce as much as men, it has the potential to increase our GDP by over $200 billion. And in today's Nigeria, you cannot overstate how important that is. In fact, I'll humorously say that Nigerian women will solve our economic problems in this country.
Interesting. Inidima, it's good to have you on the show. One day I was scrolling on Instagram and you popped up and I saw you telling a story. And so I want to commend you for being brave to share your story, because part of what we're doing together with Worthy is storytelling. And for you to come out and tell your story about your fibroid journey, I want to first of all commend you for sharing that story. We grew up in an era where some of these conversations never happened, were never allowed to happen, and most people didn't even know about these things. But you came out to share your story coming from 2020 to where you are now. Why is it important to have these conversations about women's health in Idima?
Oh, it's so important to have these conversations because, for example, cancer such as fibroid US affect 80% of women, Black women, crime, right? And, it just really got me thinking about the 63 female athletes that are representing us at the Olympics. And, they show up they show up every day, they've put in the work, they are about to contribute, to their quota in nation building. But then one would just imagine if you're saying that, for example, fibroids affect 80% of Black women in their prime, that is 8 in every 10 women. One can only imagine how many of these women that are out there representing us, how many of these 63 women are dealing with such health concerns, but despite all of that, they've shown up and contributing their quota. Now, just imagine if, as a nation, we accelerated investment across sectors such as women's health. This would lead to, exponential growth and create an environment for these women to thrive.
I mean, and this is why this conversation about investing in women's health is important because beyond even cases like fibroid, we still have the third highest maternal mortality rate in Africa with, I think, about 1,042 women out of every 100,000 live births. Besides that, we still have cases of PCOS, which is also another issue to talk about. And then you now even have the fact that we still have the patriarchy still loading over women. What do you think, as people, as influential people like you, what do you think we need to do more to ensure that our storytelling about this can lead to more investment and awareness across board?
I mean, for example, what we're doing now, advocacy, awareness, I think it is so important for us to have female representation in healthcare leadership, because I just painted a picture now that, a lot of men who are at the helm of affairs may not understand because they don't have that shared experience. And, for example, women's health issues like fibroids are the understanding and awareness of it is very limited. So it is not only, speak up, but we need to have no representation at healthcare leadership. I think that will make a huge difference.
I totally agree with you. Let me bring Jimmy in. Now, Jimmy, first of all, congratulations on your reality show, Ebuka Takes Over Africa. I watched the show in one sitting. I didn't know, and it felt great seeing that. But this also comes full circle for you because what this gives you, you are a huge sports fan. You've always been. I knew you first from the lifestyle space, but I know media and sports has been your passion exactly. We have more women for Nigeria at the Olympics. As a sports presenter and broadcaster, how important is this and what message does this send to the rest of us in this space?
Well, I mean, if it doesn't send a message to you, let me send a message across to you. It's a message of pride. As a father and as a husband, and also as a son to a very enabling mother. I come from a single home. My mom raised me by herself. I have a sister. Thankfully, I'm not married. I have a child now, so I have a holistic understanding of the struggles that the women folk go through. But fast forward to this day and age, watching the Olympic ceremony last night, and then you see Toby Amusan being the individual that is bearing the flag for Nigeria, and you already have that in your mind that that says a lot in terms of what the women are holistically doing to put Nigeria on a pedestal. Because reality is, without the women in our team today, our chances of medals would be very, very, very slim. Toby Amusa is a world record holder. She's a world leader, world champion. Our female basketball team is also one of the best teams out of Africa and going into the world as well. Our Falcons, even though they lost their first game against Brazil, but then again, um, every game in the World Cup is very, very important. Now, what does this say for the holistic conversation about women empowerment, especially within the sports world? I honestly believe that if we're able to get the private sector and of course the public sector to work in hand to help empower the female gender, then we will see an accelerated opportunity for even more growth than we've seen at the moment. I'm really excited and elated at the fact that 60% of Nigeria's contingent at the Olympics is 100 is all women, and as we go forward, I'm excited to see how this Olympic experience will give women a better platform to get the message out there. Because if you remember back in a couple of years ago, about a decade ago, the U.S. female team led the way in making sure equality was available within the sport, where they kind of held out on a strike and forced the U.S. national team to pay the female team equally as much as the male team. If you know, according to the history books, the female team of the USA, they're more successful than the male team. So they kind of forced the narrative in getting equality in terms of what they were getting paid compared to the male counterpart. So obviously, we're at a pivotal point in history where things will change very rapidly. And of course, we are here for it at Worthy.
Besides all that you do, one of the caps you now wear is also being a mental health advocate, especially for men. I had my
For
first
sure.
therapy session this year and had a couple of sessions and tried a couple of therapies. And it's one of those things we don't talk about, but also as men, we need to be able to provide support for women, especially when it
100%.
comes to women health. We need to make sure they are comfortable when they go to the hospitals. We need to make sure that even in education, they're giving equal rights. Like it shouldn't even be a conversation, but most times when we see the way the world is and the country is at the moment, there isn't a lot of consideration when we think about empowering women. And so, speak to us about the importance of considering mental health as men and how that may even play a role in empowerment, which would also lead to investment around women empowerment and women's health.
Well, yeah, for sure. Mental health is one of the most important aspects to understand because how the mindset of an individual is how they would proceed in anything they're doing, especially for the women folk as well. You must understand that no matter how us men, we always believe that, the emotional side of things is not something to pay attention to. But at the end of the day, we are all human. We're all driven by emotion. Your passion is driven by your emotion at the moment. Your ability to go beyond your threshold of pain or stress is all down to your passion and your emotional involvement. I do understand that a lot of times the women folk have been seen or have been stereotyped as weaker mentally, but that's far from the truth. Just by the mere successes of our female athletes, you understand that the mental strength that they have to perform with, juxtaposed against the men, means that they have to go further and beyond the regular limits of what a guy would go through. So for me, from a male point of view, I think we need to do a lot of readjusting in terms of our mentality towards the female. I also do believe that the mental health of the women needs to be taken into huge consideration, considering how much they have to carry, not just in terms of being women, but they also have to be mothers. They also have to be wives at the same time. So they carry a huge burden that I do believe that we need to pay more attention and give more awareness to.
I 100% agree because I remember in 2021, the goalkeeper of the Super Falcons made history by being the first female athlete who was pregnant during a
Mm-hmm.
tournament. But after
Mm-hmm.
childbirth,
Yep.
she retired. But as a man, you would have 10 kids and you continue. And
And you carry on.
exactly, and the chain goes from the top to the bottom because we'll talk about education, we'll talk about healthcare, we'll talk about economic empowerment, but it starts from schools where in growing up you had the boys sent to science classes and girls sent to arts classes. That is
Cooking
changing now,
classes.
exactly, which means you go to the hospitals and most of the doctors now are men who don't understand pain threshold when it comes to women, who don't understand what
Mm-hmm.
they go through when
Mm-hmm.
women talk about menstrual pains and the different dynamics for different women and how it affects them. But let me bring Joy back to the conversation, talking about policy. In Pakistan, they created 70 extra seats in the National Assembly, so for women and minorities. In Nigeria, that conversation came up a year ago, and for the first reading, and there was a lot of controversy about it.
Yeah.
Just this year again, it's gone through second reading, and the Deputy Speaker of the House of Reps was in support of it. But also a lot of representatives in the National Assembly spoke against it, including young representatives, some of which I wouldn't call their names, let's focus on the topic, but even the young people who you feel should know better and should get on with the program. We've gone from 17% to 11% and now below 5% female representation in the National Assembly.
Yeah.
From a policy space and perspective, and with the work Gatefield Impact is doing, how can we bridge that gap? In Nigeria, we've asked for this extra seats, which is now debated. We could give 1 extra seat in the Senate for women per state, 1 in the House of Reps, and 3 at the state level. Do you think this is a step in the right direction? And as policy activists and advocates, how can we push to ensure this comes to life?
Yeah, this is so important. And as someone who works in policy advocacy, it is very important for us to have these policies that sort of lay the foundation for promoting gender equality, women's economic empowerment, women in leadership, all of that. But it is so much more important to move on from, just those policies to actual action. And how can we do this? A few things. Education. Educating women or educating girls is one of the first ways to empower her. And in doing this, we need to acknowledge and also address the barriers to access to education. And healthcare is one of the important things, right? As the conversations that have been had already, you mentioned how healthcare access or healthcare outcomes are things that are very important to women as a demographic. And so what are we doing, what sort of incentives, what sort of policies are we implementing? Who do we have at decision-making tables? Like you mentioned, it's important to have women who have an understanding of the issues, but also an understanding of how to solve these issues. And so addressing education, another thing is financial inclusion for women. Women make up to 42% of micro businesses, but they're most financially excluded. 98% of that number do not have access to formal credit markets, even though research has shown that women are more likely to repay loans. So we need to have these conversations. We need to hold ourselves to higher standards. When rolling out economic interventions, what's quotas? We need to set quotas and targets, for women-led businesses, women-owned enterprises. We need incentives to help their businesses thrive. Beyond that, the narratives, which is something that is really important. It is important to address these things from a policy point of view, but also even more important to address it from a behavioral change perspective, because this is years of ingrained social and gender norms, and we cannot just change that overnight. So the question is, what are we saying to women? What are we saying about women in places of work, in our places of worship, in schools? As advocates, as allies, civil society, private individuals, how are we demanding better from the government? How are we holding them accountable? How are we promoting, gender equality and just the idea that women are people of themselves who deserve to be a part of, society, contribute to society? And just, tying it to the broader conversation, today we're celebrating the women delegation, and if they were not invested in, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be having these conversations. And, this just makes a case, because when you invest in women, when you empower them, it's not just for their benefits. It goes ahead to the community, the larger community, the society, and a nation at large.
So one other policy which has had a lot of debate in Nigeria has been the Gender and Equal Opportunities Bill.
Yeah.
And when I talk about this and talk about it on TV, for me, I'm almost upset, because I'm like, why should this even be a conversation?
Absolutely.
This should be common sense,
Absolutely.
but common sense isn't the most common. And so just back to this conversation, it's almost impossible to make laws that support and help with positive impact with women when we don't have that representation.
Exactly.
However, in your space, and I've seen this a lot, most of the counter argument you will get is, isn't this tokenism when we talk about quotas and giving them? A young senator, Senator Alawa Kala Jr., stated that he earned his role. He had to compete. He had to fight to get to that position, and so everyone should be able to do that. But when the political meetings are set by 2 a.m. and
I mean,
these are women,
yeah.
we want women who are married and have children to have an equal seat at the table. And so this becomes a big conversation. So what is your response to this comment about tokenism when we talk about gender parity and quotas?
I mean, in the first instance, right, women make up nearly half of the population, and just by that fact, they are supposed to contribute to society. But it's important for us to acknowledge the barriers to access. And so why is it only tokenism when we're talking about women's access, right? When we give them the opportunities, when we empower them, give them the access to education, the skills, they will be able to thrive at the same level as men do, or even better, right? And so it's a very dishonest argument or a disingenuous argument when you are talking about tokenism, because when you look at the numbers, men are more represented, far represented than women, and you absolutely have to do things to ensure that gender parity, right? And the first step again is empowering women, because when you empower them, they are able to do things for themselves. They're able to fight for positions, like the arguments that are being made. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to bring Inedima back in. When I watched your story, one of the parts which did impress me was you went beyond the talk and you spoke about, without making it look like a pitch, you offered to pay for 20 women to get screening. And so it's not just saying, oh, this is what's happening, you need to find out about it, because the reality is a lot of people can't afford access to
Exactly.
healthcare. I remember a time when a lady died in the hospital because she couldn't pay 2,000 naira for the hospital card, whatever. And I know you have a lot to say about this. So talk about this move of this actual investment, like you have done, how people can come together and do this, and also your comments about creating quota for women in the right spaces.
Nigeria, healthcare related expenses push over a million Nigerians into poverty every year. Women we don't have enough universal healthcare, that cater to, just the basic things that you would expect, right? In a sane society, I believe things like pap smears, things like pelvic scans should be free and accessible, right? So I think it is important for us to, talk the talk, but also do the work. And that is why we just need to do our bit in making sure that we support each other. But I would, put a call to policymakers. It is important that we begin to think about strategic investment, increased investments when it comes to women's health and women's economic empowerment just generally. And I think that one thing that these 63 females that are representing us today shows is that it is literally direct evidence that when you empower women, it
Yeah.
leads to equality, which eventually leads to, women just being able to contribute their own culture to nation building. And it just leads to exponential growth for the country at large.
And if something is really true, we've seen women prove to the whole world, Nigerian women, that when given the opportunity, they make stuff happen. Look at what you're
Exactly.
doing in your industry. Look at Chimamanda Adichie. Look at Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Look at Aroma Ote. Look at Chioma Ajunwa, who I remember in the Olympics when I was much, much younger. Mary Onyali. You see Toby Amusan. You see Oshola. And all what women are doing, when given the opportunity, they actually give us good results. And so it should be a no-brainer. We see even in Nollywood, we see the likes of Mo Abudu, Funke Akindele, Genevieve Nayan. So no one is picking this out of air. We've seen working, like they've shown us working, and so I want to commend you for what you do, what you are doing. And before I let you go, what's your final charge to people in your industry and how they can also use their influence to improve women economic empowerment, awareness, and investing?
I mean, in the beauty about, the space I'm in is that, I have a platform that brings a lot of people together. We have a voice, and I think it is important that we use it. Women, we have this shared experience, even, just what we experience monthly, and then just everything we have to deal with. I think that with social media and just with the platform we have, it is important to speak about the things that affect women. It is important to, ensure that we have a seat on the table and just do our bit in just making sure that there's, gender parity in this nation and globally at large.
Thank you, Inedima. Jimmy, let's talk about money. We have seen what happens with sponsorship. Now, in the last
Yep.
Olympics and World Cup, you saw Milo come out, you saw Pick Milk will come out, say, oh, we're supporting the men's basketball team, oh, we're supporting XYZ. In Nigeria right now, Jimmy, if you want to put up an event or a show right now, all the beverage brands will reach out to you. And so, as much as the economy is where it is, and I know this also because I work closely with people who are in that space, my brother who is one of them, and this is me also speaking to him, that they need to invest more in women in these
Yeah.
spaces. And so,
Yeah.
how can we actually move this conversation into supporting women economic empowerment just beyond just entertainment? Because we see it in the event space, we see it in showbiz. It's easy for people to come and put in money because there's some ROI of sorts. But in places like America, CSR is a huge part, and so there's a percentage of their earnings and profits which goes into such causes. How can we shift that conversation in Nigeria, especially with what you know about how much funding and sponsorship goes into entertainment showbiz?
I honestly think the first part to achieving anything is putting individuals in position to make an impact. I want to point out to you that not too many women are in position of power where they can actually make an impact. For me, as an ambassador for an alcoholic brand, the brand manager the brand I support is female. The overall head in Nigeria is female as well. And I do understand that because of their position, they're able to empower more women within that space where they operate. I think what is more pivotal and important for us to note is to get women in more decision-making roles. Once we're able to do that, then we're able to see things from a different perspective. I think one of the reasons why we're struggling so much in terms of being able to empower women and, of course, change the narrative of how they're perceived and the things they do is because we don't have enough women in position of power where they're able to make impact in terms of decisions and how women are perceived. I do know that within the corporate world there is there's an opening, there is a awakening that is currently being moving around the industry where um, if you have the right property and it caters to women well enough, then you will be in a position where you will be able to get people to even listen to your pitch in the first place. But I honestly think the easiest way for us to get in a position to make change is to get women in a position of decision making. I'd like to see the sports minister of Nigeria being a woman for the first time. I'd like to see the FA chairman or a president of the Nigerian Football Federation being a woman, because once you have people in that position, then things that relate to women, that pertain to women, would be given first priority because you are seeing things from a female perspective. Right now, a lot of things that we do, sports wise, entertainment wise, is seen from the perspective of a male gender. And I think the minute we start changing that, I'll give you an example. Mo Abudu, for example, she's in a position of change where she sits as the CEO of the company and she makes decisions, and you can see the strides, the huge strides that she's making as an entrepreneur and as a leader. So I do believe that once we empower women and put them in a position of decision making, we will be seeing a lot of impact, not just from the participation side of it, but also from in terms of leadership and decision.
I think that's spot on. And as we wrap this up, Joy, with Gatefield Impact, it's a public policy and media firm. I've followed your campaigns from the one about stopping indoor smoking, which was
Yeah.
huge. I've seen Gatefield hold government accountable with data. What's the way forward? How can people get involved? Young Nigerians. Big Brother starts, I think, tomorrow. Whenever we have the energy, we saw it in the last election. How can people get involved in advocacy around women economic empowerment and women health, generally in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would really say simply just be a part of the conversations, have these conversations. You may not think that it is doing much, but behavioral change, again, doesn't happen overnight. You have to keep spreading the narratives, positive narratives about women, their contributions to society, what they can do, the importance of their agency, and yeah, just generally be a part of the conversation.
That's a good place to leave it. I want to say special thanks to our guests, Inidima, Jimmy, and Joy. Thank you so much for your contributions. We can go on and on and on, but my director is going to kick me off the set very soon. And I do know we will continue this conversation on an informal note when we meet at the mixer, which we have soon. But I just want to say both of you are doing really amazing work in your space. Don't stop using your platform to tell the right stories. You're doing the right thing. You have my number, you have us, and we're always here to support what you do as
Sure.
advocates, as activists, as ambassadors. So always feel free to reach out. The weekend show here, I think we have about 60-70% women, including presenters, than men. We've had female camera women, and so it's something where we must all talk the talk and walk the walk, and both of you are
Absolutely.
doing it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Joy, when I was much younger, we did the Not Too Young to Run. We've been
Yeah.
involved in these spaces, and so we will continue to support. But it's extremely important that we keep talking and we also keep working on improving policy. But finally, Worthy has brought us together for this conversation, and they've been having a series of conversations around breaking gender stereotypes in media, in activism, in economic spaces, and that's why we have this conversation, because
Yeah.
we need to have this conversation. We need to educate people, because ignorance is no longer an excuse.
Absolutely.
This is the second part of this series. We'll continue the conversation next week, but for now, that's all we can take on the lifestyle segment. We'll take a quick break. When we return, more on The Weekend Show.